Hello everyone, hi, welcome to the channel of Wall Street Mojo. Friends, today we are going to discuss a tutorial on restricted stock units. We are going to discuss some of the examples on the same, what the tax implications, and we are going to discuss some of the differences. Let me show you one article and then let's analyze something. Over here in the article, it is written few details on, in addition to the ESPP, that is the employee stock option plan for employees in certain roles have been eligible to receive restricted stock units. So that they are saying RSU units. Now see, restricted stock units is one of the popular way of equity compensation used by employers for stock-based compensation, that is known as ESPP sort of. Restricted stock units is basically is valued in stocks at the time of grant, but however it is not passed to the employees until they satisfy some of the vesting conditions. So I'll give you some, this above extract over here is basically of Tim Cook Apple memo on stock ownership program for employees. And Apple initiated its restricted stock units, which is known as RSU. You can say that to retain and motivate their employees. So in this particular tutorial, we'll be looking at so many details regarding restricted stock units. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the same. At the very first end, let's discuss what are restricted stock units. So restricted stock units, a restricted RSU is basically, I'll write RSU as a short form, is one of the package of equity compensation offered by a company to its employees. Very important, because it is offered by a company to its employees in terms of company's shares. Now what happens, however, the shares of the company are given to the employees at the future date as per the vesting plan of the company. So the employee receives a stock, you can say stock compensation, after they complete the vesting requirement, like such as required performance milestones or some of the market conditions or serving the company for a particular length of time, and so on and so forth. See, now Amazon, I'll give an example of Amazon. Amazon utilizes restricted stock units as a primary source of equity compensation, as it aligns basically the long-term interest of both the shareholders as well as the employee. I'll show you the article of the same. You can see over here in the article, we seek efficiently manage shareholders dilution while maintaining the flexibility of issue shares for strategic purposes like financing, acquisitions, aligning employees' compensation with the shareholders' interest, and so on and so forth. So we utilize restricted stock RSU as a primary vehicle for equity compensation because we believe that this compensation model aligns the long-term interest of our shareholders and employees. So once the restricted stock unit is basically assigned to an employee at a fair market value, I'm repeating, it has been assigned at fair market value, they are considered as the income of the employee. And since it is an income of the employee, the company withholds a percentage of the shares in order to pay the income tax. See, nevertheless, the employee can receive the remaining shares and has an authority to sell them, time at his own convenience. So why it is restricted? Why this R letter? So let me give you some explanation of the same. It is because the grant is limited. Okay, it is limited and is subject to vesting schedule. So the company establishes vesting requirement. They have some sort of requirement with which they work, and they based on the performance of an individual, or you can say the length of employment. So apart from the basic requirement, the company sets the limit on the transfer of the sales of the unit. So if an individual does not meet the requirement set by the corporations before the end of the vesting period, the unit of a person are forfeited. As simple as that. So this exactly happens in this scenario. Now, restricted stock units example. Let's discuss an example. Let's say, suppose there is a person who gets a job proposal from a company. The company over here, they believe that his skill set will turn out to be really good asset for the company. So therefore the company decides to offer him RSU, that is restricted stock units, close enough to 600. They are giving 600 as a part of the company's compensation, apart from giving him substantial salary and other benefits. So the shares of the company trade in the market close enough to the market price. I'll just write my MP as the market price as $50 per share, and that makes 600 RSUs worth close enough to 600, that is 30,000. Right, 30,000 is the total value. So the determination of the market price is usually done based on either the prior day's close price of the stock or the average high or low price. Okay, that is how it's been calculated. However, if the person is supposed to get, let's say, close enough to 30,000 over here as an incentive, he has to serve the firm for at least close enough to in the neighborhood of 5 years. And due to this of the vesting schedule, so the person will be eligible to for close enough to 20% of the total RSU. Total RSU, you can say, at the end of the first year of the employment, and another 20% of the RSU, of the total RSU in the second year, and so on until he gets all the 600 RSUs at the end of the 5. So whatever be the price of the shares at the end of the 5 year, the person will receive approximately 30,000 at the end of the 5th year. Got it? So the RSU works as a motivational factor in the organization. It not only allows the employees to stay with the organization, but it enables them to perform well, which in turn results in the increase in the performance of the shares eventually. Like for instance, the person stays with the organization for, let's say, for 5 years. If he stays for the 5 years to get all the 600 RSUs, then and by the time the price of the shares jump to close enough to 70, so over here 600 will remain the same, but over here it jumps to 70. Now what? So he will end up receiving how much? 42,000. As simple as that. So however, it is taxable income, so the company will hold the few of its shares for the income tax and the capital gain tax. So in contrast, if the person would have left the job during the vesting period, he wouldn't be eligible for the reward. Like for example, let us assume that the person leaves the job after 1 year of his employment, then he will be available for only how much? 150. That is 600 divided by, it should be 120, sorry, RSU, and he would forfeit the remaining 450 shares. So basically, not 5 years over here, it should be 150, and the balance would be 600 less 150 will be forfeited, that is 450 shares. Now what is the difference between the grant date and the vesting date, which is very important to learn. At the very first end, what is grant date? See, one should not get confused with the grant date and the vesting date, as both the dates are different. On the grant date, what happens? The company provides you your restricted RSU. I'll just write grant date. The company provides your RSUs. Okay. However, you are not allowed to sell or transfer the RSUs for a particular time. Once the particular time is up, the company gives a permission to sell or transfer the RSU, which is known as the vesting date. In fact, there are a number of enterprises, they ask the employees not to sell or transfer the vested shares for a period. Like Amazon's restricted stock unit schedule, I'll provide you the same. Let me show you something over there. Can you see over here the schedule vesting restricted stock units that is given in 2017, 2018, 2019. So this is for the year ended data that we have. So Amazon has granted in total 19.8 million restricted stock units out of its total 7 million RSUs vests in 2017. Got it? And 7.2 million of RSUs vests in 2018. Now, what is RSU as a full grant? What is RSU as of a full value of grant? So, at the very first end, restricted stock units are considered to be a total amount of the stock. The total amount of the stock grant for a reason that the grant is worth the full value of the shares at the time of the vesting. Thus, unlike the stock options that are often considered underwater, RSUs will not result in any loss. So, meaning the outcome will always lead to some income even though the market price drops. Let me give you an example of RSU example. Let's say over here, the company over here grants how much? 15,000 restricted stock units to its employees on the vesting date. When these shares are given to you, the stock price of the company is 20 per share. So that's the stock price. It results in the grant value of 3 lakh. As simple as that, 15,000 into 20. However, if the stock price were 15 a share at the vesting date, the grant value would still be worth 2,25,000. That is 15,000 into 15. That is, there is a drop in the price. So it is because the restricted stock units do not consider the grant date. Instead, they take into consideration the vesting date. As simple as that. So let's see how the calculation go about in this particular scenario. So the shares of stock price at vesting, it was 20. So the value of the shares at the vesting or delivery is 3 lakh. And when it is 15 per share, it goes to 2,25,000. I hope you have got the idea. So, below I'll show you an Amazon's restricted stock units activity in the year 2014, 15 and 16. So this is basically Amazon's restricted stock unit, and over here we note that the total RSUs granted in 2016 is 9.3 million, and the RSUs that were being vested were 6.1 million, and the RSUs forfeited were 2.3 million. Now let's understand the taxation issue on the restricted stock units. So in case of the taxation issue, when the shares of the restricted stock units are delivered to the employees at the vesting date, they are taxed. They are taxed. Thus the taxable income of the employee could be market value. I'll just write MV as the market value of the shares at the time of the vesting. Now the employees have a compensation income which is subject to the federal and the employment tax as well as any state and local tax. So for the US employees, the withholding tax appears on the form of W2. Okay, along with the income. I'll give you an example of how the example on RSUs taxation work. Let's say suppose there is an employee who is delivered 1,000 shares in total. These are the number of shares at the vesting date with the fair market value of the share, that is FMV, close enough to $20 per share. So therefore we will recognize a taxable income of how much? 1,000 into 20, which gives us 20,000. Now since the income is taxable, the company may offer various options to pay the tax due on 20,000. With this we have following choices, withholding to cover, that is the first thing. Withholding to cover. Then we have close enough to some other details like cash, details of cash, and so on and so forth. Now there are some of the benefits that we have of restricted stock unit. The first and the foremost benefit that we have of this is, there are possibly lower taxes of RSU. See, restricted stock units don't include section 83B of provision. Therefore, the possibility of the overpayment is minimum in the case of RSUs. Now, the second benefit that we can talk about is deferral of shares issuance. I'll just write for you issuance. So companies in the organization can issue restricted stock units without diluting their share base. Now this creates a substantial advantage over the other form of equity compensation, like such as employee stock option plans, statutory or non-statutory stock option schemes, and so on and so forth. The third benefit that you have is economical. Now what happens, companies and organization, they incur in this particular scenario RSUs minimum administrative expenses because there is no actual shares to hold the record of track. The fourth one is you can get the tax referrals over here. So the deferrals, not referrals, over here. Deferrals. So what happens, the company or firms can defer taxation beyond the vesting date by delaying the issuance of the shares to the employees. The last one is over here is the foreign tax is friendly. So the foreign tax becomes friendly over here, and restricted stock units for the US employees working outside the United States have similar taxation as compared to those working in the home countries. So they are taxed on the value of the tax at the time of the delivery, not granted and liable to the capital gain tax on the sale of the stocks. There are some of the restrictions also. There are some of the drawbacks, like there are no voting rights. You can say there are no voting rights. And then you have there are no dividends you have. Then you have no section 83 election in this particular scenario. So after discussing all of this thing, we can finally conclude that the restricted stock units are considered a better equity compensation as compared to these stock options, because as RSUs have provided a downside protection. As simple as that. So it only states that the employer is giving more money to its employees. In the straightforward words, restricted stock units enables the employees to get richer with the growth of the company. And RSUs are going to gain popularity quickly due to its benefits over the other equity compensation. According to Redford.com, it says that only 3% of the technology company had RSU-centric equity plans 11 years ago. In the US, however, this number has grown to more than 50%. 50% in the technology as more and more companies started practicing the restricted stock units. Thank you everyone.